tonight to have our guest, Dr. Eric Fritz, former commander, retire. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Evans, and the other ROTC unit commanders, cadre, distinguished guests, and of course all the cadets and midshipmen. It's a great honor to be here tonight. But let's be honest, every keynote speaker says that, right? Same words. But for me, I'm literally dumbfounded to be here on this particular night. And here's why. 15 March 1986, 3 decades, almost to the day from tonight, I sat right where you midshipmen and cadets are sitting. And I have the program from that time. And if you look closely, you'd be like, oh, Dr. Fritz, they used a typewriter font. No, they used an actual typewriter. So the guest of honor was a gentleman, a retired officer who had come back to serve the community and serve the university. And I thought there was a lot of interesting parallels there. So it is really, for me, an honor to be here, because back then, I was at my first tri-service military ball. It was remarkably similar to where we are now, except that back in the 1900s, we held them in the Michigan League, and of course everything was in black and white. I was finishing my freshman year, wide-eyed, tired from 0500 drill team practices. I was reading Tom Clancy novels, dreaming of saving the world from the communist menace. I was nervously anticipating my first summer deployment. My beautiful wife, who is here with me tonight, was newly dating me at the time, but she had refused my invitation to that ball because she had heard all about us Navy and Marine Corps guys and thought I might be a little too fast for her. So thankfully, I eventually tricked her into thinking I was a good catch, and she has been loyally and radiantly at my side ever since then. And here we are, exactly 30 years later, completing perhaps some sort of giant cycle. The curious timing of this, as well as my many years of working with veterans here in the local community and on campus, leaves me achingly aware of the endless cycle of warriors transitioning from civilian life into the military and back again, of your choosing to step off into the greatest journey that many of you will ever take. And tonight, I'd like to talk to you about that journey, to talk to you as I would wish to go back and talk to 1986 me, as I stared forward into that uncertain future. For some of you, commissioning is years off, and for some of you, it is just around the corner. My remarks tonight are centered on that noble process, because I want you to, I need you to understand the depth and gravity of that commissioning day and all the work that precedes it. Beyond the hand-raising, beyond the silver dollars and the hugs from family members, your commission will be a sacred charge, a sacred trust, and you will carry it, in most cases, to your grave. Even as I stand before you now, so resplendently retired in beard and waistline, I carry a commission from the President of the United States of America. An oath of enlistment expires. Your commission never does. You must actually formally request to resign, to have permission, to be allowed to resign your commission, because you will serve, quote, at the pleasure of the President of the United States of America. Now, you may not look closely at your commission when you receive it, putting it aside in a box with your diploma and going on your way. But here is the first line, and I think it bears memorization because it is a message from your country to you. Know ye that, reposing special trust and confidence in the patriotism, valor, fidelity, and abilities of you. Those words are heavy. Let them sink in. Special, trust, and confidence. Let them tattoo your soul. This is no summer internship, no starter job. You are joining a team comprised of the tiniest slice of the cream of our civilization to submit yourself to doing the bidding of our elected government, often at great personal cost. When you raise your hand and you take that oath, the door shuts behind you. The President holds the key. You literally give yourself away in a form of high-stakes indentured servitude. I submit to you this is no trivial matter, but it is also the grandest of adventures, on which you will learn, in my opinion, the full greatness of our nation and of human nature itself. It's like anything else in life. The greater the risk, the greater the reward. Now my remarks take a slightly more somber turn, but I hope you will bear with me. The journey is worthwhile, I believe. You never forget the first soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine that you see die. Summer 1986, USS Guam LPH-9, deployed in the Mediterranean. Marines were ashore conducting a peacetime amphibious exercise and camped on the edge of a forest. A tracked vehicle got out of its lane. A Marine was sleeping out of his area. Disaster. Back on the ship, emergency flight quarters. I watched from afar in the hangar bay as the docs worked madly on this Marine. He made it to the ship alive. He died there in the OR. There is a strange empty pause when someone dies in the military. There is a period of collective shock, ache, some announcement on the 1MC by the chaplain, and all too shortly thereafter, flight quarters, all hands man your flight quarter stations. Because we go on. It's what we do. We're America's all-volunteer fighting force, the likes of which has never before been seen on this planet. The legions you are joining are some of the finest warriors in the history of our nation. The enlisted, prior enlisted, and commissioned officers in this room are living proof. And you must not underestimate the seriousness of the task that you are undertaking to step up and lead as a player on that team. That Marine died because rules were not followed and procedures were ignored. He died because of failures in leadership. And that line of accountability will always lead back to you and the commission you are here seeking. Special, trust, and confidence. Peacetime or wartime, risk is everywhere in the military. It can reach up and take you, or any of your men or women in any unguarded moment. Every last one of you seeking a commission is taking on an almost holy quest to lead, to be held accountable to and for the very best of this nation's youth, who nobly put service to others before self. And the task before you is nearly impossible. It will demand your very best effort. It will demand almost your very soul. My 20 years of service have brought me to highs, the memory of which still make my hair stand on end, and the lows of a nearly implemented plan to end my own life. Make no mistake, you are not joining Google, but I believe you can enjoy completing this journey, be it 4 years or 15 or 30. John Paul Jones uttered one of the most important phrases that I have ever encountered when he said, "To be perfectly obeyed, seek first to be perfectly esteemed." This, in my opinion, is the very core of successful service as a commissioned officer. Think about what you want from a leader. You want someone whose word is impeccable, for in our world, trust is everything. You want someone who is a master of their craft, who knows your job and their job and yours. You want someone who will fight for you, who you can see actively interposing themselves between you and unpleasantness. You want someone who constantly demands your very best effort, but knows when you are utterly spent. You want someone with great moral clarity, who is willing to dig in and die in place if the stakes are high enough. You want someone who makes it look easy, but inspires you with their strength, who at the right time is willing to take a calculated risk in order to attempt great things. You want to have a leader that you can brag about to others. You must be that leader for the men and women under your charge. You should view your commission as two things, and two things only: a ruck full of heavy expectations and duties that strain you constantly, and also as a shining sword and shield that you can use to clear obstacles from the path of your team and to protect them. You ever see that Marine in the commercial with the dragon blasting fire and the shield? You know, he's protecting, it's like that. I can tell you what a commission is not. It's not a source of superiority over others. It's not a tool to get out of work. It's not an excuse to power trip or to bully or to seek medals for yourself. Those things are a shortcut to utter irrelevance as an officer. And if you have any of those things in your heart, do us all a favor and quit now. But if you can inspire your people, they will richly reward you with loyalty. If you can inspire your people, they will amaze you with the ferocity of their pursuit of goals. They will follow you to the very gates of hell, laughing as they bleed out beside you, ecstatic just to have been in your company. For those of you who know the quote, "We few, we lucky few." But if you are casual in your devotion to them, lackadaisical in your pursuit of mastery, slipshod in your attention to detail and regulation, your soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines will notice, and they will meet your standard. And the next thing you know, we have emergency flight quarters. Unsat. I hope you have had and will have good mentors. Look for and seek out other leaders who strike you as admirable and skilled. They exist both above you and below you in the chain of command. Learn from their style. Engage them if possible, even if they're very senior. A long line of mentors help me understand my commission and what it means to lead and to serve. I can only hope that you will have some like Gunny Lindstrom, or Lieutenant Urinka, rest in peace, or Admiral Bowler. Sometimes you will find an anti-mentor, someone who shows you what not to do. You will eventually face a toxic leader, and you must find a way to protect your people. For those of you keeping good notes, my anti-mentor was the one who had me considering suicide. I eventually decided I simply wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of beating me, but it was a narrow thing. For you readers, and you should all be, I recommend the book Tarnished by George Reed. It's similar to a book I had in my heart but never got around to writing after my last deployment because I had to finish my dissertation. Now I'd like to illustrate some points by using some flashbulb memories of key moments from my career. This is also known as Sea Story Time. So your commission will give you the authority to delegate almost anything, but sometimes you must not. I once told a junior sailor under my command, who was on restriction for some offenses, that I was sure we could find some way to get him to his wedding that had long been scheduled for the day before Christmas, only a week away. I asked my senior chief to find someone who was staying in town for leave to take custody of him that day and escort him from the base to the wedding and back. My senior chief, normally the most can-do sailor on the planet, who had already taken over 75% of my job with my blessing, looked at me gravely and said, "Sir, are you asking or ordering?" Well, okay. I had grossly underestimated how badly this young sailor had burned out his chain of command. They were furious, and they were not wanting to do him this favor. Now, I knew my senior chief would obey without question, but I would not force my men to cash the check that I had written. So I called my wife, told her I would be late for Christmas, stayed on base for 2 days of my leave, escorted the sailor, both of us in dress blues, to his wedding and back to confinement. That cost me 2 days and a butt chewing from my wife, but I got a free dinner. And what I gained in the eyes of my NCOs was priceless, and I felt that every day until I left that command. There will also be times when you find yourself in unusual situations that call for somewhat brazen use of the authority that comes with your commission. In Iraq, I accepted a chaplain's dare to build a scout camp and start a scout troop for Iraqi children on an Iraqi Special Forces base near ours. Excuse me. Once we had gotten an Iraqi general to agree to let us try, the issue was getting equipment and material. I had assembled a motley crew of 50 volunteers, from E2s to an 06, who were willing to put their few free hours each week towards this goal. In the Army, a lieutenant commander is regarded as a field-grade officer, so my signature could be used to call down construction equipment, flatbeds, giant cranes, more. We borrowed damaged housing units, abandoned HESCO barriers, all sorts of construction equipment, spools of wire from the dump. I challenged them every week, come up with a way to do this. And they'd hatch some insane scheme and present me with some form and say, "Sign this, sir, and don't ask any questions." So I figured, why not? If I'm going to go to Leavenworth, at least I have great stories to tell, right? The team absolutely ate that up. In 8 months, we built a 5-acre camp with multiple tents, housing units, security wall, soccer field, basketball court, running water, lights, archery range, and a stage. All volunteers. 0 budget. No one outside the chaplain's office having given any sort of permission or order. And you can still see the remnants of this camp on Google Earth to this day. Your commission does not make you infallible. With authority comes responsibility and accountability. Sometimes you have to be the bad guy. When I was a clueless boot ensign, I had a chief lie to me for weeks about inspection readiness and convinced me to give him a 4-day pass right before the inspection. Well, when I did a spot check on Friday, to my horror, I found nothing as it was supposed to be. Remember this, young ones. You get what you inspect, not what you expect. I called the division to muster and announced that everyone in the division, including me, was in hack for the long weekend until the checklist was 100% complete. It was pretty horrendous. But under the leadership of a bosun mate first class, Gerard K. Kalani, who became my new BMC, they came through. When I asked bosun mate second class Johnny Lee Farrell where he had obtained all the missing equipment on such short notice for me while in the shipyard, I got a reply that I will never forget. "Sir, ask me no questions and I'll tell you no lies, sir." We passed the inspection, we got authorized to land a helo on the ship for commissioning, and we avoided an embarrassment for our captain. It ended up defining the relationship with my new chief and making us one of the best divisions on the ship. Your commission charges you to both give and obey orders, but there may be times when you are given an order that is unlawful. In that moment, your mastery of all relevant regulations can make all the difference. During our Desert Storm deployment, I was standing midwatch in the Northern Arabian Gulf as officer of the deck on an Aegis-class cruiser, and a particularly troublesome tactical action officer was down in the Combat Information Center, who outranked me and had positional authority over me in terms of the employment of the ship as a weapons system. He ordered me to come right into a shipping lane, in the dark, where the contacts were so numerous I could not track them. He had purely political concerns that we were passing too close to the carrier, but he was using a highly inaccurate strategic system and not a navigational radar to compare positions. His data was wrong, but he would not listen. There was a serious risk to the safety of the ship if I followed his order. The fate of 400 sailors, mostly asleep, rested on my shoulders. What do you do? I went all in. I refused his order. I flipped the phone to speaker mode. He gave the order again. I refused it again in front of 12 witnesses. He went nuts on the circuit, screaming various pleasantries, ending with an order for me to report to him in CIC when I came off watch, saying, "That's one order you can obey." And I did. After watch down in CIC, he tore me up for about 5 minutes in front of the entire CIC watch team, spittle flying. But I kept my drill team face on, and I insisted that I had acted correctly. He then profanely directed me to leave his CIC. It was a long 2 hours to reveille, and the meeting with the senior watch officer I knew was to follow. In theory, I could be facing admiral's mast, and I would have demanded court-martial. But I knew the captain's standing orders by heart. Nothing may override your duty to maintain the navigational safety of the ship. In the end, the order was unlawful, and I walked away unscathed. Know the regs. Have your priorities clear, and don't flinch, because when everything is going sideways, there's no time to research. You also shouldn't let your commission go to your head, because there will be times when you make mistakes. For reasons that are later unclear, you let something slide that you know is not right, when things go very, very wrong. Like the second time I was facing court-martial. It's going to be a theme here. My conning officer was a senior chief because we were experimenting with having a training enlisted officer of the decks, which was relatively novel back in the 80s and pretty common now. When we were coming along the approach, he used a rudder order to adjust course as we closely approached the oiler, because we were right of track. So now any SWOs of the audience just got a real knot in their stomach, because it turns out there's a reason when we're approaching an unrep ship, we just use half-degree course changes and just kind of come up like this. But you gotta have the hands, right? Aviators, you with me? Yeah. He does a rudder order, right? And we end up with cruel physics. We end up coming with advance and transfer. We're 80 feet from that oiler, and we're closing as we come alongside. It's not a comfortable position to be in. The line handling teams on the main deck were running for their lives. Everyone assumed that a collision was unavoidable. My captain was behind me on the bridge wing, screaming my name into the wind. "Eric! Eric!" I actually saw myself sitting at the long green table, explaining why I had put a hole in the side of an oiler, caused a huge international oil spill, wrecked a $1 billion nuclear-capable national defense asset, and killed and injured dozens of shipmates. When disaster looms, your vision will narrow, and all you will have is your most deeply reinforced knowledge and training. Everyone will look to you and your commission for answers, and if you stay unflappable in the face of chaos, you will provide your team a priceless anchor point. But if you lose your bearing, your team is doomed. No matter how badly you want to run around screaming, you must not, for all eyes are on you. You must choose quickly and without error. Not deciding is also a choice. It's usually wrong. I zeroed in on my conning officer, who had locked up. I put my hand on his shoulder and told him what to say. Come right, 1 degree, steer course 001. Any sudden rudder movements would guarantee a collision. The ships were hydrodynamically locked together, side by side. Come right, 1 degree, steer course 002. I had studied this situation, ships this close. It was something you were never to allow to happen, but there I was. If we try and pull forward or slide back, we get sucked into one of the low pressure zones, another collision. Come right, 1 degree, steer course 003. So our only choice was the gentlest of sideways separations, but we were still locked together. Anger roiled within me. I was the Special Evolutions OOD. I was the captain's chosen ace, and I was about to flush both of our careers down the toilet. Another degree off Romeo Corpin, and another. The master helmsman earned his pay that day. Finally, we slid loose, went out to about 200 feet separation. Somehow the deckhand still had the shot lines intact. The captain came over to me. His only words were, "Nice work, Eric." And then he laid below. We never spoke of it again. The biggest mistake of my career, from a stupid violation of procedure. But for the grace of God, I should be a disaster at sea case study in your leadership seminar. And I would not be standing here today. Procedures exist for a reason. Master your craft. Know them and the thinking behind them and the science behind them. Because sometimes, because of bad luck or your own stupidity, you're going to have to roll your own procedures. Army Specialist Justin Saint was the last soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine that I saw die, or rather, heard. 2008, Baghdad. I'm closing out my 20 years of service with a no-notice, 7 days before Christmas, year-long, involuntary mobilization to serve with the Army's 18th Airborne Corps in Iraq. Yay, surge! Not gonna lie, this Navy surface warfare officer did not see that coming. Hua, all the way. But the president said go, and I went. Specialist Saint was not a door kicker. He was, of all things, my mail clerk. And for month after month, he would hand me mail or packages, and we'd chit-chat. And looking back, there was always something a little off, a little haunted about him. And looking back, he wasn't holding up well. Perhaps it was the stress of working 7 days a week for 15 months straight, or of being under fire and never being able to fight back. In any case, I never pushed forward towards this soldier. I was an augmentee, a Navy guy. This soldier had other officers in his Army chain of command. I, and others, took our eyes off the ball, the well-being of our charges. The night Specialist Saint put his M4 in his mouth, we heard the shot. But you hear gunshots and explosions all the time. You briefly wonder what the hell that was. Then you go back to sleep. Unset. I cannot be perfect. You cannot be perfect. None of us can be perfect. But you must live every moment of your active and reserve duty striving relentlessly for perfection. Because as a commissioned officer, that is all that you will have to fall back on when things go south. That you did your best, that you left it all on the field, that you lived up to the lofty expectations of your commission. Peacetime or wartime, every corner you cut in training, every inspection point you don't max out, every evening you cut off PT or studying early, that could be the thing that you look back on for the rest of your life in agony. The Marines do the best job, in my experience, of grinding this into the DNA of junior officers. I bet I could go my entire life and never see a Marine officer eating chow before all his or her Marines are fed. But this is applicable to all of you, to all of us. Take care of your people, and they will take care of you. Over and over again in my career, I found myself looking at some crazy task or demand from my commander, and I would put some unreasonable expectation on my team. Deliver to me the only perfect score on a main space fire drill in all of PAC Fleet this year and save this inspection. Or figure out a way to wire up this Iraqi camp with electricity on a budget of $0. And as God is my witness, they rose up every single time and killed it. Get the leadership right, and the career will follow. Here's a quote from service, about service, from Marine General Mad Dog Mattis, one of the best warrior scholars I've ever encountered and someone that you should all be reading. The better angels that he refers to at the end should be taken to mean the best and most noble part of our human nature. Quote, "Now, having seen the moon shine on the other side of the world, and having worked with others of many cultures, having worked in one of the most diverse teams on earth, that of the U.S. military, having faced down grim circumstances without losing our sense of humor or moral balance under conditions where war's realities scrape away civilization's veneer, we have learned that nothing can stop our spirit unless we ignore Lincoln's call to our better angels." Now, after all that blah, blah, blah from this old man standing before you, it's time for the condensed version, the key takeaway. So here it is. Carry your commission like a sword and a shield. Protect and enable those in your charge, and strive relentlessly for perfection. The citizens of our nation demand it of you. Centuries of warriors who have gone before you, many of whom gave the last full measure of devotion, demand it of you. And as the father of a son who might someday be drafted to serve under your command, I expect nothing less. Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, when it comes to success for you Wolverines, you might say, I have a special trust and confidence. Thank you, and go blue.